Welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, the DOJ rips into Trump's dangerous attacks on the Justice Department.
Meanwhile, Putin issues a stark threat to NATO allies.
And SpaceX makes history with the first private spacewalk. All right, but first, the first mail-in ballots for the 2024 election are now making their way to voters in Alabama as we speak, officially kicking off voting for this year's election. It all comes as mail-in voting was supposed to already be underway in the swing state of North Carolina, but that process was delayed after a court ruled that ballots must be reprinted to remove Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as an option. RFK suspended his campaign last month and endorsed Donald Trump, and he's been fighting ever since to get his name off the ballot in key swing states, but that's been an uphill battle in some cases. Last week, the Michigan Supreme Court ruled his name will remain on the ballot in that state. Meanwhile, the next state to offer mail-in ballots is Wisconsin, starting September 19th.
And on Wednesday, the Department of Homeland Security designated the Electoral College vote count and certification as a special national security event for the first time. The move puts the Secret Service in control of planning and directing federal, state, and local law enforcement. DHS says it was necessary following the January 6th Capitol riot, and it follows a recommendation from the Congressional Committee that investigated the event. Other examples of special national security events include the presidential inauguration and the annual State of the Union address.
And meanwhile, fallout continues from Tuesday's debate between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Trump now confirming he will not debate Harris again, posting on Truth Social yesterday. Trump said there will be no third debate, referring, of course, to his first debate against President Biden, and then this week's debate against Harris as the second debate. In his post, Trump claimed he won his debate against Harris, saying that there's now no need for a rematch. Trump's statement comes as his allies have been actually encouraging him to take the stage with Harris for a second time, with some suggesting earlier in the week that he was still open to the idea.
Look, I think he's very open. I think the American people deserve to see these two people and hear their ideas. And unfortunately, as you just laid out last night, we really didn't get that. What a disservice that ABC News did to the country. They had an opportunity here to really get to know Kamala Harris, really hear about all of her radical ideas.
That was RNC co-chair Lara Trump on Wednesday. Trump's announcement seems to be influenced by new internal polling from his campaign, showing he received a 2-point bump following the debate, while Harris's numbers basically remained the same. Harris, meanwhile, believes she and Trump, quote, owe it to the voters to have another debate.
Meanwhile, the Department of Justice is responding once again to accusations that it has become a political arm of the Democrats. FISM's Ian Patrick has the details.
Amid heightened accusations of politicization, Attorney General Merrick Garland is once again defending his department as an independent source of justice. In an impassioned speech before the Department of Justice staff, Garland thanked his colleagues for the jobs that they do every day. Appearing teary-eyed at times, he affirmed the importance of the department's work.
We have only one rule. We follow the facts and apply the law in a way that respects the Constitution and protects civil liberties. So I want you to know that you have not only my gratitude, but the gratitude of every person whose life you have saved or changed through your work. You do not hear it often enough. Thank you.
But he also focused on what he said was their professionalism amid heightened attacks on the DOJ.
Over the past 3.5 years, there has been an escalation of attacks on the Justice Department's career lawyers, agents, and other personnel that go far beyond scrutiny, criticism, and legitimate and necessary oversight of our work. These attacks have come in the form of conspiracy theories, dangerous falsehoods, efforts to bully and intimidate career public servants by repeatedly and publicly singling them out, and threats of actual violence. Through your work, you have made clear that the Justice Department will not be intimidated by these attacks. But it is dangerous and outrageous that you have to endure them.
Ultimately, Garland vowed that the department would never be used as a political weapon, despite the many accusations that it has been.
Our norms are a promise that we will fiercely protect the independence of this department from political interference in our criminal investigations. Our norms are a promise that we will not allow this department to be used as a political weapon. And our norms are a promise that we will not allow this nation to become a country where law enforcement is treated as an apparatus of politics.
This is only Garland's latest response to Republican accusations of being weaponized by the Biden administration, particularly against former President Trump. Trump even brought up the issue once again during Tuesday's debate with Vice President Kamala Harris.
It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy.
Trump specifically alludes to the multiple legal cases brought against him following the January 6, 2021 riot, but the Justice Department has faced accusations of favoritism and weaponization in other cases as well. For example, Fox News legal editor Carrie Urban says the Justice Department was aggressive in prosecuting the January 6 rioters since 2021, but have been virtually silent on anti-Israel rioters this year. Urban also says the Justice Department failed to enforce a federal statute against the protesters who harassed conservative justices at their homes back in 2022, following the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Even reports from us here at FISM News show that the Justice Department has been particularly active in abortion cases, seemingly on one side of the issue. The DOJ is adamant in prosecuting cases involving pro-life protesters and the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, or FACE Act for short. Perhaps the most notable case dealt with pro-life advocate Mark Houck, who was arrested by the FBI at his own home, but was later vindicated in court. But at the same time, the Justice Department has been slow and even hesitant to prosecute violence against pro-life centers enacted by pro-abortion organizations or individuals. In fact, a recent analysis showed that 97% of all FACE Act prosecutions have actually been specifically used against pro-life Americans, despite many of those cases involving pro-life Americans standing or praying silently outside of abortion clinics. It should come as no surprise that many of these cases also seem to have happened under the Biden administration itself. This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thank you so much for that report there, Ian. Meanwhile, now moving on to some of the updates from the campaigns themselves, where Trump continues to court working class voters. Speaking at a rally in Arizona last night, Trump announced new plans to end taxes on overtime pay if elected in November.
I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime. The people who work overtime are among the hardest working citizens in our country. And for too long, no one in Washington has been looking out for them. Those are the people that really work. They're police officers, nurses, factory workers, construction workers, truck drivers, and machine operators. It's time for the working man and woman to finally catch a break, and that's what we're doing because this is a good one.
It follows Trump's proposal to also end taxes on tips, a plan that was later copied by Kamala Harris. A spokesman for the Harris campaign called Trump's latest tax plan as nothing more than a snake oil sales pitch.
At the same time, the Harris campaign is raising the media's eyebrows with how much they have limited the presence of news photographers on the campaign trail. White House News Photographers Association President Jessica Koselniak complains that Harris's team has participated in an unprecedented reduction in access to news media since Harris became the presidential candidate. She addressed the Democratic presidential campaign in a letter saying, quote, "The WHNPA strongly calls on the Harris campaign to reconsider the number of media seats allowed on Air Force Two. Koselniak told Axios that the association received only one seat on her plane instead of the available 13. Longtime White House news photographer Doug Mills said it's essential to have a full pool of photographers since every photographer sees each event differently. The frustration of the Photography Association comes as Trump has consistently appeared in front of the press during his campaign, even though he likewise doesn't have a full media team traveling with him. And up next, Putin gives a stark warning to the U.S. That story and more after this short break.
Hi, I'm Aisha. At first, I was debating whether or not I was really pregnant and took a test. While I was waiting, they talked to me about different pregnancy choices and different options and information that helped me be more educated. To confirm, I got an ultrasound of the pregnancy test, and it was for sure positive, and I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partners today.
Welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's jump right into our Ukraine coverage. Russian President Vladimir Putin is warning the U.S. and Britain that Western missiles inside Russia will be considered NATO's entrance into the war. Putin's announcement comes as America and the UK were in discussion today whether Kyiv should be allowed to use ally missiles on Russian territory. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov threatened the allies, saying Russia's response will be appropriate to the U.S.-British agreement. The Western ally talks come amid Iran's weapons export to Russia, which could help the eastern country make aggressive advances in Ukraine. Western officials say that although the diplomatic talks among NATO would not likely bring significant change to the war, it would help Ukraine's eastern front stand its ground against more advances from Russia.
And it's not just Russia that's upset with Western countries, as Iran has now summoned European diplomats following those accusations that it's supplying Russia with short-range ballistic missiles for use in Ukraine. The Iranian government summoned diplomats this week from Britain, France, Germany, and the Netherlands. Iran strongly condemning their accusations per local state-run media and reportedly promising an appropriate response. However, it's not clear what exactly that means. It comes shortly after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Russia would begin using those Iranian-made missiles against Ukraine in the coming weeks.
And the Agency for Palestinian Refugees, or UNRWA, says 6 staffers were killed in an Israeli airstrike on Wednesday. The agency says the staff members were killed after Israel targeted a school facility in central Gaza where refugees were sheltering. Although Israel disputes the claim, the report has swiftly drawn backlash. United Nations head Antonio Guterres called the strike unacceptable. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said yesterday that Israel must protect humanitarian zones while acknowledging that Hamas often uses these locations for their operations.
We need to see humanitarian sites protected. And that's something that we continue to raise with Israel. At the same time, we continue to see Hamas hiding taking over, and otherwise using these sites from which to conduct its operations.
Israel has challenged UNRWA to prove its claim. A list showed the names of 9 terrorists killed in the strike, highlighting 3 of them as also being employed by UNRWA. Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon reshared the list while saying the UN is ignoring that Hamas terrorists have taken over the agency.
And turning our attention for a quick moment to the situation down in Venezuela, where the chaos continues. The U.S. government imposed sanctions yesterday on 16 allies of Venezuelan president and dictator Nicolas Maduro for helping him certify illegitimate election results in July's presidential election. The U.S. Treasury Department says these allies obstructed the vote and carried out human rights abuses to benefit the Venezuelan president. Those affected by these new sanctions include the head of Venezuela's high court, as well as prosecutors and state security forces. It comes only days after Edmundo Gonzalez, he's the president's political rival who claims he's actually the real winner of the election, went into exile. The high court recently reaffirmed Maduro's victory, despite never actually releasing the election tallies to the public. And up next, we have plenty more news coming up. We'll be right back after a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Few figures in American history have captured that uniquely American persona of do-it-yourself hard work, heroism, and general bravado. One of these rare icons is a man who many argue ushered in the modern age of American culture. He was a hero of the Spanish-American War as a member of the famed Rough Riders, and he also helped push the United States forward as a preeminent superpower on the world stage. He's considered by many to be the first modern president of the United States, and indeed he's the first man ever elected to the White House in the 20th century, Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president of the United States. Roosevelt was the first president who was born too young to have served in the American Civil War. He was from New York, born in the year 1858. He suffered much as a young man, from health issues to the tragic deaths of both his mother and his first wife when he was in his mid-20s. But in his late 20s, the direction of his life began to change for the better. He married his second wife in 1886, and 10 years later, he joined the American military in the Spanish-American War. Now, he became both a war hero and a folk hero as part of the military regiment that would become known as the Rough Riders, in which he led a victorious cavalry charge in the Battle of San Juan. His notoriety in the war gave him a boost in popularity on the national stage, and as such, he became governor of his home state upon his return from action. Now, William McKinley chose him as his running mate in the 1900 election, and when McKinley was sadly assassinated in 1901, Teddy Roosevelt became president of the United States at the age of 42, which made him, at the time, the youngest man in the nation's history to sit in the White House, and he's still the second youngest to this day after John F. Kennedy. Now, he was a pioneer in the White House, pushing the United States to the level of national world power. One of his greatest achievements was the overseeing and construction of the Panama Canal, which revolutionized maritime travel from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific and vice versa. Now, for 400 years previously, sailors needed to travel all the way down around the southern tip of South America to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific and back. Roosevelt also earned himself a Nobel Prize for orchestrating a peaceful resolution to the war between Japan and Russia, and he was also a purveyor of the national park system in the United States. He did a lot of things. Now, Roosevelt left the White House voluntarily after 2 terms in 1909. He campaigned for the presidency one more time, actually, but did not get voted in before his death in 1919. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
Are you tired of the chaos? There are a lot of things that make noise, but only a few that truly matter. As a parent, I want to leave something that will last for a long time.
You invest $300 a month increase on slowly by the time you retire.
Not just an inheritance of money, but a legacy of godly values.
Here at Financial Issues, we want to help you grow your money, but our main goal is to help you honor God with the money that He's given you.
Invest your money in a God-honoring way. Go to financialissues.org.
I was sobbing. It was a cry for prayer for God. I'm so sorry, please. So I got on the internet and I just started seeing like abortion pill reversal, and I found a hotline number. We're gonna get this started, and it's gonna seem like a lot, but it's gonna be so fast, and it's because you only have a certain amount of time left. It's gonna be okay. We got this. We're gonna try to fix this for you and make sure you know you're good and the baby's good. Don't worry. And when I came here, my heart was so warm. Other than Planned Parenthood, where I was very cold and I was lost, and I just felt like I could have been, it was just terrible. And to know that Compass Care could tell me something different and could reverse a medication like that, that's amazing. That somebody would go as hard as if it was their children to make sure your child is gonna be alive and stay safe. So I want a lot of people to know it's possible. You can save your baby. You can reverse that abortion.
And welcome back once again to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case. We're going to kick off this segment here with some pretty shocking new data coming from the Census Bureau. A new report shows that migrants accounted for more than 2/3 of U.S. population growth in the year 2023. According to that data, the number of foreign-born people here in the U.S. rose from 13.9% in 2022 all the way up to 14.3% in 2023, marking the largest share recorded in more than a century. In fact, the number hasn't been this high since the immigration boom in the early 1900s, where in 1910, the rate of foreign-born Americans was 14.7%. So far this decade, migrants have accounted for almost 3/4 of the population growth in the U.S., most of them coming from Latin American countries. And it is important to note that this data does not distinguish between legal and illegal immigrants.
And it seems like Springfield, Ohio can't catch a break. Multiple government buildings and 2 schools have been evacuated since yesterday because of bomb threats. The city commission office said it's unclear whether the threats they received today were new or if they were related to a bomb threat email yesterday that went out to multiple agencies and media outlets as well. Law enforcement cleared the facilities mentioned in the email, including 2 elementary schools, the city hall, and a few driver's license bureaus. Springfield Police Chief Allison Elliott added that they also cleared county court buildings out of an abundance of caution. Elliott said the FBI and local police are currently investigating the situation. Now, the threats came following recent eyewitness reports that Haitian migrants were disrupting Springfield residences. But rumors of migrants eating pets and wildlife in town have largely derailed any serious discussions.
Truly a troubling situation in Springfield. We'll continue to follow that situation. Meanwhile, in more criminal-related news, New York City Police Commissioner Edward Cabin resigned yesterday after federal agents seized his cell phone. The criminal probe is reportedly tied to corruption in nightclub enforcement. Specifically, Cabin's own twin brother owns a nightclub security business and is accused of selling his influence all over the NYPD. It's one of multiple federal probes into corrupt dealings in Mayor Eric Adams' administration. Adams announced yesterday afternoon that former FBI and Homeland Security official Thomas Donlin will now serve as the interim commissioner.
And the progressive movement called the Human Rights Campaign had enough of losing companies to conservative influencer Robbie Starbuck's anti-DEI campaign. Starbucks has been incredibly successful at calling out major companies on their DEI practices, which resulted in the companies withdrawing their support from race and gender-based policies. Those who no longer partner with the Human Rights Campaign include Ford, John Deere, Harley-Davidson, and Lowe's. Initially, these companies abided by HRC's woke social credit core system, but they soon started changing their mind when Starbucks exposed their progressive and discriminatory practices online. And HRC is fighting back. The movement has now launched a campaign against a conservative influencer for turning away major companies from the nonprofit. While HRC says that corporations will regret not partnering with DEI practices, Starbucks disagrees. He says DEI trainings cost a lot of money for companies, and they are simply pressured into these situations.
It makes me really curious what their strategy is going to be here, because no matter how much you go after Starbucks, the reason why people are abandoning these companies or protesting against them, it's not because of him, because he's a great spokesperson. It's rather what he's exposing about these companies, and people don't like it.
Yeah, and they're just angry. I think he's making real difference here, and of course, you know, they don't like huge companies just stopping their agenda.
Yeah, exactly. Still in some cultural news today, a prominent Republican politician made waves in Christian circles this week. Speaking at the Museum of the Bible on Wednesday, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri warned that the nuclear family in the U.S. is under assault. He said both in the popular culture, but also in the law itself, pointing to a tax code that he says penalizes marriage. He said, quote, "We have policy upon policy that makes it harder to raise children. We have a radical left in this country that now wants the decisions about how to raise children to be made by the government, not to be made by parents." Now, his remarks are actually incredibly similar to comments made by Trump's running mate J.D. Vance, who has repeatedly accused the Democratic Party of, quote, becoming anti-family and anti-child.
Definitely concerning, but lastly, we have some interesting news here. SpaceX has completed its first ever spacewalk yesterday, featuring tech billionaire Jared Isaacman. Isaacman partnered with the private space company to test their new spacesuits, with SpaceX engineer Sarah Gillis and 3 others accompanying him on the journey. The group's time in space was quick, lasting less than 2 hours. For NASA, a trip to the International Space Station usually takes 7 to 8 hours. But the commercial trip still left Isaacman in awe of our blue planet. He said, quote, "Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, it sure looks like a perfect world." Here's a snippet of his journey.
Good call. SpaceX, back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
NASA Administrator Bill Nelson celebrated the first ever private space journey, saying, quote, "Today's success represents a giant leap forward for the commercial space industry."
It's very exciting. Hopefully we see more successful spacewalks very soon. And that shot was just gorgeous of the Earth. I would have to agree with him. It does look quite perfect.
Yeah, and scary at the same time. I don't think I could do it.
I don't think I'd want to be up there either, no.
But it's amazing to see God's creation from up above. All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And for any updates until Monday, you can follow us on social media, or you can download the FISM app right to your smartphone. Thank you so much, and God bless, and you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you on Monday.